This is Bloomberg Crypto, a daily Bloomberg iHeart podcast. And I'm Stacey Marie Ishmael, managing editor of crypto for Bloomberg News. It's Thursday, October 20th. It might seem like the conversation about the metaverse right now is a combination of jokes about Mark Zuckerberg's digital legs, snark about the cost of virtual reality headsets, and a real lack of clarity on why any corporation at all might want to be in this space. So we asked Matt Boyle,
God forbid, how are you going to take your 2-hour lunch in France in the metaverse? I think you'd much rather be at a bistro somewhere.
A Bloomberg senior reporter who's written a lot about the future of work, to help explain exactly what's going on here, especially as it relates to businesses hiring Chief Metaverse Officers and what those folks even do all day. Matt, welcome onto the show.
Thanks for having me.
What's going on in the metaverse?
Well, quite a lot if you've been reading the news lately. But I'm mostly focused for our work shift editorial area in terms of, how are companies and particularly the C-suite managers approaching the metaverse? What are the opportunities? What's the promise? What is the peril? And, I hate to say this, and we all kind of hate to say this, but, the jury is very much still out there when the company that is the poster child for the metaverse can't get its own employees to use its own metaverse.
Well, that's that company that you're referring to, that poster child, which renamed itself to Meta to embrace the metaverse. There are no toes to dip, right? Because we're still trying to figure out if people in the metaverse are going to have legs. But this idea of employee adoption of a technology is interesting to me because the metaverse is being positioned as it's almost like a Zoom enterprise-like product. That's something for people who work in large corporations will find benefit from, which is very different from some of the consumer branding that we had out there previously. Like, what's explaining that disconnect?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Zoom. If the promise of the metaverse, or one of the potential promises of the metaverse, is to, bring employees into some sort of immersive environment, which may or may not enhance their work experience. I think if you hate your manager, you're still going to hate your manager in the metaverse. But you mentioned Zoom. We can't even get Zoom calls right these days. There are tomes and books being written and research papers coming out of Harvard studying interactions over Zoom and who gets left out on the Zoom call, and should that Zoom have been an email, or should that 30-minute Zoom be 25 minutes? And my argument is yes.
For sure.
The smartest companies are shortening meetings, using Zoom less because they know what sort of impact it is having. My wife is on Zoom calls 12 hours a day. She comes out of a work-from-home day. She looks like she just went through the Battle of the Bulge. It's insane. So if you're saying let's all go to the metaverse and have a more productive meeting, my answer is, why can't we just, we're not even getting meetings right now with the simplest of technologies for video conferencing. But that said, again, one of the applications of the metaverse will certainly be, workplace applications, and how Slack and Salesforce and all those various workplace applications that we know and loathe are going to happily coexist within some type of metaverse. I don't know. What I do know is, it's going to be far more relevant for my 14-year-old son, who has for the past 10 years, has lived in basically 3 worlds: Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite. And he is so comfortable there. If his first job is something similar to any of those experiences, then okay, I'm kind of getting you there. But that's when he's 24, 10 years down the line. So again, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains here, as with any big shift in the workplace. And my God, how many huge shifts are happening at the same time in the workplace as we're talking about whether or not the metaverse is going to be really impacting corporations? We've got labor organizing movements at places like Starbucks. We have people freaking out over the fact that they don't even know where their remote workers are, much less how to pay them. I mean, there's so much going on, not to mention the whole return to office battle, that, I can imagine how moving work to the metaverse or corporations shifting a lot of their operations to the metaverse might become slightly lower priority when they can't even hold on to their best people.
Work is hard is a big takeaway I'm hearing there.
Yeah.
But what you're also saying is something that we hear a lot about, kind of everything that tends to be smushed into like crypto plus Web3 plus metaverse, which is the criticism that these are solutions in search of problems.
Yeah.
And, there are always going to be people who will be like, no, Bitcoin actually solves XYZ or Web3 solves ABC. But there's way less consensus on what exactly the metaverse solves for, what it even is when different people are talking about it. But that doesn't seem to have stopped some corporations from hiring chief metaverse officers.
No, exactly. But I think they're chasing the consumer opportunity here rather than figuring out how it's going to change the way that they work. I mean, all the luxury companies doing, metaverse fashion shows and, Starbucks doing their coffee-related NFTs, whatever that turns out to be. They are very much looking at this as a branding opportunity down the line, a way to get closer to customers. Because, again, a lot of big brands missed the boat with e-commerce. We're very slow to that. And do not want to miss that boat again. So digital, FOMO is very much a part of this. But how Procter & Gamble and LVMH and all the companies that are hiring chief metaverse officers, it seems like that role is sort of being put in place to have a point person. Okay, you're in charge now. We know there's a lot going on with this metaverse stuff, and but we don't really understand it. I'm a 56-year-old CEO from Central Casting. I went to Harvard, then McKinsey, and now I'm here. I don't get this stuff. Let me hire somebody or find somebody internally for a heck of a lot cheaper, who maybe was talking to me about NFTs the other day. Hey, you could be our chief metaverse officer. And you smile, but that's as easy, that's as quickly as it is happening in some of these places. You must know something about this. Well, now you are our newly minted chief metaverse officer. Congratulations. And then there's sort of like crickets. So I was like, well, what in the world do I do now? And that was the whole point of my story. What do these people do all day? We know some of them are getting $1 million paychecks. Okay, are they deserving of them? We don't really know yet. But, if one of these chief metaverse officers turns their brand into, sort of this amazing Web3 phenomenon, then they're earning every penny. Are they not?
There have been a few stories, I'm thinking of Kashmir Hill, for example, of folks who have tried to be in the metaverse.
Yeah, like our own Alex Barinka the other day,
exactly.
Right? Yeah, that was good.
And, one of the things that they have said is it's kind of exhausting because you right now, in order to achieve that, especially if you're thinking of it as a virtual reality context, is like you've got something strapped to your face.
Yeah, that weighs over a pound.
It weighs over a pound. It's a little bit disorienting. There aren't always other people there, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, that's something that we've seen in crypto, for example. There are spaces, there's one called the Sandbox, there's one called the Central Land, where the number of active users in there, like relative to kind of like your typical gaming platform, is very low. And so you've got like a dead zone, nobody's necessarily here problem. And then you have got the question of, okay, I'm here, how do I fill in my Excel spreadsheets?
Yes.
like what practically can I be doing in the metaverse? To your point about experimentation, given that people can't really do much in most cases right now, what are some of the strongest arguments you've heard corporations make for why they're plowing forward if they are?
I mean, one could be just collaboration. We certainly have been disconnected over the past 2 years. And, for a 40-something, maybe seeing a colleague in the metaverse isn't going to be enough, maybe not enough to then having like an in-person lunch or a drink after work. But maybe for younger workers, having a more immersive collaborative experience, whether that's onboarding a new employee, doing a training session, sitting in a big virtual auditorium to listen to, your fearless leader tell you that we're going to attack this or that market, or, we're going to do this or that. that might be, enough to have people sort of feel a sense, okay, I'm kind of getting a better sense, and here are my colleagues, and they are, I look to my right and my left, and they're, okay, there they are. Mm-hmm. They might not have legs, but there they are, and they're chatting, and we're kind of like passing notes during the meeting, and isn't that funny? I mean, maybe that will be enough. I'm not sure yet, but then, Alex Brinka's story the other day was great because, she couldn't figure out if she could type while she was in the metaverse, and then her makeup got smushed, and it's like it's always the everyday stuff that ends up being the huge issue here. Yeah. It's just happened throughout technology. You know this better than I do. It's that you often overlook the everyday, the quotidian examples. Like, wait, how did we account for this? Oh, don't worry about it. This technology is wonderful. It'll solve all our problems. So it's figuring out those little things like, can I do an Excel spreadsheet? Can I just do my expenses in the why in the world would I want to do my expenses in the metaverse?
Yeah, you don't want to do your expenses normally.
You don't want to ever do them anywhere.
So.
But could I be onboarded and meet all my new fellow summer interns? Okay, now I'm with you a little bit. I mean, yes, I might rather be going bowling with them in real life, but it's a start.
We'll be right back with more from Bloomberg senior reporter Matt Boyle. In the story that you wrote about Chief Metaverse Officers, you talked about one in particular that wasn't even a person.
Yes, that was very interesting. It's kind of prompted my interest here when someone said, hey, Matt, have you heard about these Chief Metaverse Officers? I said, let me look into it. And one of the first companies that came up is Publicis Group, which is a big, massive advertising giant. They're French. Their clients are Nestle, Walmart, UBS. I mean, blue chip clients. They do very well. But when I looked into it, they said, they hired a Chief Metaverse Officer. I said, well, who is he or she? I'd love to interview this person. And I realized it was not a person. It was a digital avatar, a very sleek French-speaking, or I guess French accented lion named Leon, of course. His name is Leon, who had a YouTube video, and he had a LinkedIn profile, and he had an email address, although every time I emailed him, it got bounced back to me. So maybe he's still, maybe he's
still onboarding.
Maybe he's still onboarding or hasn't got his email. Or maybe he's like, us young people, he's like, email? What's email? I don't use email. Slack me. But in the end, and of course, given Publicis is French, it took them 3 months to get back to me to basically say, like, well, yes, this is our Chief Metaverse Officer. But then when they finally got back to me, they said how many hundreds of agency people are actually working with their brands on sort of Web3 related stuff. I'm like, okay, well, now it's getting interesting. But again, that was because brands really want to figure this out. Mm-hmm. It was not because everybody at Publicis Group is working in the metaverse. God forbid, how are you going to take your 2-hour lunch in France in the metaverse? I think you'd much rather be at a bistro somewhere. So yes, it really runs the gamut from digital avatars to very high qualified people, who used to work at McKinsey and at Goldman Sachs who are becoming Chief Metaverse Officers to, again, the other people I mentioned the other day is just like the guy in the room who raises his hand when they say, who knows anything about NFTs? Bam, you're our Chief Metaverse Officer. So that's how haphazard the approach is right now among companies. But they all kind of agree this is something we got to pay attention to.
As you say, it's not like companies haven't done this before, right? Like 20 years ago, it was like, anyone heard of the internet?
Yes.
Great. You're now in charge of our digital strategy.
Yeah, and now you're the Chief Transformation Officer or the Chief Digital Officer. I mean, as we know, the C-suites are never hesitant to add yet another person to the C-suite. And while some of them have real role, like a Chief Information Officer, you need a person in charge of your internal IT. But then there's a Chief Technology Officer who's like, okay, well, I'm in charge of finding out what's next in technology. And then you have a Chief Digital Officer, and now you have a Chief Metaverse Officer. And I can imagine the four of them in a room sort of arguing over, like, who's really the top tech, gun. I would not want to be in that room, but I'm sure those conversations are happening somewhere in corporate America.
Yeah, just not necessarily in virtual reality.
No.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being here. What a pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
You can find more of Matt Boyle's reporting on the Bloomberg Terminal on Bloomberg.com, where he writes for WorkShift, and on Twitter at BizBoyle. And if you're interested in more about the future of work, follow WorkShift on Twitter at The Future. Yep, that's at TheFuture. On the next episode of Bloomberg Crypto, finance people, including, to be clear, finance reporters, love round numbers. Love them. So we're celebrating episode 100 of the Bloomberg Crypto Podcast by answering some of the questions you sent in. Thanks to everyone who emailed us at crypto@bloomberg.net, replied to our survey, or messaged us on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Crypto, a daily podcast from Bloomberg and iHeartRadio. For more shows from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Send us your comments, questions, or suggestions for the show to crypto@bloomberg.net, or find us on Twitter. We're @crypto. The supervising producer of Bloomberg Crypto is Vicky Vergolina. Our senior producer is Janet Babin. Our producers are Mohammed Farouk and Sharon Barrero. Our associate producers are Ty Butler and Moses Undum. Desta Wonderad is our engineer. Original music by Leo Sidran. I'm Stacey Marie Ishmael. We'll be back tomorrow.